What's going on, guys? Going to be another Power Hour stream, but we're going to do things a little differently today. So, what I wanted to do today, since I just released a couple of videos on how to read order flow using like volume profile and whatnot, I thought since you guys really like the volume profile analysis, you guys really like the volume profile kind of technique that I use, I thought throughout the day I was going to mark out basically every single level that I was looking at, and how I basically trade using the volume profile, right? So throughout the day, as you can see on my chart, I've been marking basically every single move, every single like target and support, resistance, all the little levels that I was watching throughout the day, I've been marking. Okay. If you guys are in the Discord, I've been live calling these basically the entire day. So it's going to be a little more difficult to talk about on stream in hindsight. But just know that in Discord, basically every single one of these levels was called out prior to it being drawn. Or I drew it, called it out prior to it being hit. Okay. So we're going to start off obviously from the beginning. I'm going to talk about what happened at the beginning of the day, and then I'm going to talk about how you could have traded this using the volume profile levels and whatnot. We actually just hit a level that I just called out here in Discord a couple of minutes ago. So let's get started. So today, or like right now towards the end of the day, the profile looks very balanced, right? It looks extremely balanced. You have a little bit of volume towards the top of the day on the value area high. So up here, you have most of the volume towards the middle, with the POC being pretty much balanced in the middle, right? And then you have a little bit of volume down towards the bottom, but not a lot. So the overall day looks like a balanced profile. But if you guys were watching this profile throughout the day, it was not like this. Most of the day, it was a P shape. We saw that initial breakdown. Where's my brush here? We saw that initial breakdown. It's kind of hard to see with the volume profile here. I'll turn it off. So we saw that initial breakdown here. You had that gap down about probably like 1% or so. Yeah, about 0.5%, nothing too big. So you saw that initial gap down. You saw most of the volume towards the morning session being towards the low. So you had that failure downward, and then you reversed, right? This is where your open is, right here on this blue line. And then the green line was your low of day. I'm using the new indicator that we just released to the Discord, the Oasis Trading open, high, low levels. So blue is going to be the open, green is going to be the low, and red is going to be the high, right? So right here, we saw the gap down, failure downward. Once you regained VWAP, basically for the rest of the day, you were bullish. So what do you normally see when you have that gap down? You have a little bit of volume, but then you shoot up. The volume profile is going to give you that P shape. Most of your volume is going to be towards the upper range, while you only have a little bit of volume towards that initial failure, right? So what do we know about P-shaped volume profiles? P-shaped volume profiles, you want to be a little careful selling the highs, but you are pretty safe to buy the lows because the overall day is bullish. So you should be seeing, as long as your price is above VWAP, so let's say VWAP is right here, as long as your price is above VWAP, you're pretty safe to buy those lows on that P-shaped profile, okay? So you have the P-shaped volume profile for the start of the day, as you saw here, kind of a bull flag, right? And then you have the VWAP coming in below price. So you had both your setups that you would look for if you were trying to buy the lows, okay? So let's bring back the volume profile, and I'm going to talk about some of the things that I showed off during the trading day, okay? Actually, let me go over this little bit that's behind the profile, then we'll bring it back. So the first thing that I called out was the range low test. Okay, so I actually did not delete any of our drawings from Friday. So this was all the stuff that we talked about on Friday's stream. So if you guys didn't watch Friday's stream, make sure to go back and check it out. I talked about how to trade the accumulation of that day. This was a capital B profile, so you had a little bit of action on both the high and the low. Hey, Bree, appreciate that Prime sub. You're actually a brand new sub, so welcome. I appreciate that. Thank you. Appreciate you joining the stream, supporting. I don't know if my button's working or not. I probably just spammed it. But thank you very much for giving me the Prime sub. So yeah, yesterday, or not yesterday, on Friday, you saw that capital B shape profile. We had a little bit of price action towards the top, failure downward, and then you had some price action towards the bottom. So you had that kind of capital B, right? And then towards the bottom of that capital B, you had a massive accumulation. We talked about that on Friday. We talked about how to trade that. I did not delete any of the drawings here because we were heading towards that range, and that was going to act as a lot of resistance for the trading day for today. Okay, so I called this out at the start of the day in the Discord. I told you guys that the range low was coming. It was going to act as resistance. Okay, so you saw that test of the range low. It failed downward. That became your high of day. Okay. So then when we failed downward, you put in a low on that daily open. So that blue line is your daily open. Okay. So the daily open acted as the low for this accumulation, and then this shoulder here, this left shoulder, acted as the high of the accumulation. So you had a failure downward, you had your low put in, you had your high put in. This became an accumulation range, okay? So then all of these little arrows, all these levels here are basically just testing your accumulation. So you had a bounce off the daily open, off the accumulation low, off of VWAP. Very, very strong confluence there for a buy. So you had the bounce off the lows there, called out in Discord as well. You came back up to retest the high of the range right there. You failed the high of the range. You bounced off the POC here. So I marked out the POC, called this out in Discord. You were looking for a little bit of support coming out on that POC. So you had a couple of bounces, popped up. The target that I called out in Discord was the value area high. You had the value area high there, which actually became the accumulation deviation, okay? So the accumulation high right here was acting as that high, but then you had a little bit of a deviation here. But at the top of that deviation was the value area high. So that was going to be strong resistance, which gave you kind of an idea that this was not going to be a breakout. This was going to be a deviation, okay? So we called that out. That failed right there, confirming the deviation, came back down towards the low of the range, and then he popped off the low of the range. Once again, we called out the value area high as the target. The value area high popped up, price popped up off the accumulation low. You hit the value area high as the target, and then you started to deviate. You started to kind of fail downward off that value area high, right? So we had a little bit of a failure. You kind of chopped in and out of that value area high, and then you retested the accumulation high, okay? So you had the accumulation high back here. Retest, acted as support, and then you popped up, retesting that range low, okay? So you had that range low from yesterday. It was your high of day, and then it was your secondary retest, okay? So once this happened, we called out the POC and the daily open as our targets, right? This was during lunchtime, so we weren't really looking to trade this. But you had your POC and you had your daily open. So you failed your range low, you failed your daily high, failed downward, you tried to find support off the POC, could not do it. Failed downward towards VWAP, tried to find support, could not do it. Failed POC again, back down, we called out the value area low right here. You lose the daily open, value area low and daily low are your targets. So you had the value area low, target hit, tried to reclaim VWAP, did not. We called out this gap in Discord. You tapped that gap pretty much perfectly, bounced out of it. You reclaimed the value area low. Like I've told you guys before, when you reclaim the value area low or you reclaim the value area high, you are going to look for the POC and the other side of the value area. So if it's the value area low, you look for the value area high, and vice versa. Okay? So you reclaimed the value area low. I called out the POC as resistance, and I called out this gap right here. Okay? So the POC got front ran a little bit, and then you failed downward, reclaimed VWAP, popped up, and then you tested that gap pretty much perfectly. Okay? None of this is hindsight. If you guys are in the Discord, I called out every single one of these levels prior to them being tested. Okay? So I know for you guys on stream, this looks like hindsight. I can show you the screenshots once we're done. Pretty much all these levels were called out prior to them being tested. Okay? So you had the small gap here, acted as resistance, pulled back, and then you reclaimed that POC. Okay? So your POC acted as support, popped up. We called out the value area high as your target. You tapped the value area high pretty much to the tick, failed back down to the POC. Okay? You tried to gain the POC here, but then you went for another test. This level was the point of origin here. Okay? So you had the point of origin coming in. There's the point of origin test. Okay? So the point of origin was tested. You failed back down, towards the POC, and then you bounced off the POC as support. Okay? So this gap hasn't been tested. This is a new gap that I'm watching. So I'll move this over. Okay, so after this POC bounce, I called this out in Discord. You were looking for the daily high, and you were looking for the range low. Those were your targets, okay? So you tapped the range high, you tapped the the range low, you tapped the daily high. Both of those targets were hit, okay? Next, I called out this gap here, and then I called out the 50% of the range, okay? So then you came up and you tapped the 50% of the range as your next target. Boom, done, easy. Now we're actually testing the high of the range. You have not tested the gap. That would be your bearish target. Okay, so that is the entire day's worth of price action on the SPY and how you could have traded it. I'll pull up some of these screenshots. We'll go over them. I'll start with the very first screenshot of the day. So here's the very first screenshot of the day where I called out that range low. And then here is where the range began to form. So here's where that range began to form. You see that shoulder being tested, right? Okay. Here's that shoulder failure, and then you're retesting the VWAP and the daily open. This becomes your range low. As you can see here, that becomes your range low. Let me delete these as we go. So there's your range low being tested, popping back up into your accumulation high. Okay. So here is that value area high that we called out. Here's that POC being marked, and then I mentioned that if we lose this value area low, you're going to be looking for, if you lose the daily open, you're going to be looking for the value area low and the daily low, okay? Here is where that kind of value area high deviation started to happen. Here is that value area low being tested after that break of the daily open. Here is where we called out the gap. Let me delete these. We called out that gap as your next target. Here is that gap being tested. Once you reclaimed the value area high, there was the POC resistance that came in and front ran price a little bit. Now there's more screenshots in between these, but I'm not grabbing every single screenshot because there's just too many. What is this one? This one is the small gap that I called out here. So here's where that gap is. You see that gap right here on the left side of the volume profile? There's a tiny little gap there that lines up perfectly with the accumulation high, okay? So you see that small little, that small gap right in that accumulation high resistance. So that was the next target. And then here it's hit right here. So there's that gap being hit. And then we also called out the next target, which would be that value area high. Okay. There's the value area high being tested right off of the POC retest. Here is the next call out for your next target, which was the range low. Also the daily high. But before that happened, you pulled back to the POC for a little bit of a support test. And then here's that breakout right off of that POC. The breakout of the POC straight into the range low, into the daily high. And then that's basically it. And then we have the mid-range. We called out the mid-range here as the next target. And then you had the mid-range be hit there. And now we're basically up to speed. We're all live now. I just wanted to go over how you could watch the volume profile develop throughout the day, and you can grab levels throughout the day to target or to use as supports and resistance for whichever direction you're trading, right? So today, now we're kind of balanced, like I said, but for most of the day, throughout the morning session and the lunch session, it was more of a P shape. It was more of that bullish shape. You had a little bit of volume down towards the bottom, but most of the volume was towards the high. You guys have any questions about anything I just went over, how to find those levels or kind of how to know where to target and what to look for? If you guys have any questions, just feel free to put them in chat and I'll grab them. Pretty standard stuff, though. If you guys watched my volume profile videos, if you guys watched even the new order flow videos that I went over, it's very similar to that as well. So basically what you're watching right now is your main levels are a deviation of the range high. So if you do fail below the range high, you would be looking back into these lower levels. This is range low and the 50 on the range. But if you don't fail that range high and you do continue higher, you would have to go out a little bit to find some targets. And what I would probably target is most likely that range low there, and then your daily open of Friday. So those would be your two breakout targets if you do continue higher. Very unlikely, though. You are extended on the VWAP. So you probably will consolidate or pull back here. You also, so this is something that is a little bit more advanced, but if you have a uppercase B session, so we have that uppercase B, right? And like I always told you guys, that uppercase B gives you a gap in the middle, right? So if you have an uppercase B and then you have your next trading day, it doesn't really matter what kind of session it is. It could be a balanced session. It could be a P-shaped session. It could be a lowercase b. The lowercase b would be the least likely scenario for what I'm about to tell you, but so it'd be balanced is kind of 50-50. The P shape is where you kind of want to use this technique, and then the lowercase b, this technique would have kind of a lower probability. But the technique is, if you have an uppercase B as your previous session, and then you have a balanced profile or a P-shaped profile on a lower session for your target of that. So if you have a bullish target, if this is breaking out to the upside For your bullish target, you want to target that gap as your final target. Now, as your kind of as your primary target, as your first target, you could target the daily low or like that range low. But your final target, where you really want to take most of your profit, where you want to see kind of the biggest move, is that gap. So like this gap in between this session here, if you have a breakout day on the next session, you want to see that gap being filled. Now this could go for a bearish day as well. So let's say you had an uppercase B, and then you broke out towards the end of the day, and then you have your balance session, or you have your lowercase b session. Okay? Same thing here. You would want to target that high of day, but you want to have a primary target of that gap. Okay? So if you have a bearish day here, you could be balanced, or you could be kind of bullish, and you would target that gap in the middle. So this little gap right here in between these two nodes, that would be your final target. That area of rejection, right?